the lockdown has basically been like, if you took it super seriously, it's basically been home arrest, right? Like not going outside, not having all the freedoms that you wanted to have before, like just being trapped in your house. Basically, that's what the whole country's experienced for the last feels like a rather long time.
Man,
So
these prisoners have got it easy. Fed a lot of people with that one.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of No Idea Yet. Too afraid to ask? Too lazy to Google? You're in the right place. Here, join us to chat about any and all topics and figure out what it is that we just don't know. Yet. Haha. I'm this week's host, Freddie, and joining me we have my good friends, Jonathan.
Hello.
And Alistair.
hello there.
This topic, before last week's topic, so the connection is a surprise, to be honest, but it's going to help us out, I guess. This week, I wanted to talk about Prism.
Prison.
Can I get
Okay.
an ooh from the crowd?
Ooh.
That actually,
Just
sorry,
you
I
did
did all
say
of my
crowd.
expression there with my face.
It's not geometry
Yeah.
we're talking about, is it?
No, not prisms. Prisons.
I mean,
Now,
it may have been a
I've-
bit dry
I've-
otherwise.
I
No,
was thinking,
but-
why don't I think about it? Yeah, I obviously did a bit of research for this for the one we just did, so fresh off of it. But and I watched some of the
Yeah.
new Daniel Radcliffe Escape from Pretoria, whatever it's called.
This was a topic that I started looking up just out of interest a while ago, because I was going to use it, but then never got around to it. And there's a lot more than I ever thought. So we're going to delve in today into the system, the history, if you think they work, pros and cons, and some of the darker sides of prisons, including privatization and prison labor, not even to mention the history linked with slavery. So, just to start off, who wants to give me their definition of what they think
Yes.
a prison is?
I'll give it back.
Go on,
Take it
Johnny.
away, Johnny. I think you got in there.
I think we were right both at the very same time. Did we decide? Right now, I'll do it. I'll. Somewhere you lock up bad people. I guess it would be somewhere to lock
Done.
away people
Mic drop.
who have done something illegal or unethical, immoral, and then keeping them out of the general public for both. I guess initially it was as either punishment as well as just to get them out of the general populace. You know, it's keeping everyone safe from them as well as punishing them for the bad that they did.
You're not going to be employed by Merriam-Webster, Johnny, with your lengthy ass. Alistair, if you'd be so kind to divulge what you would define a prison as.
Yeah, I think Johnny got most of it in his very lengthy description there. I think, yeah, the kind of the fine line between it, right? Is obviously it's got to be a deterrent because it's got to be bad because, you know, otherwise, you know, if it was nice, people wouldn't care about doing crimes, and that's kind of defeats the point. But equally, it's got to be, you know, not. It's supposed to be more sort of more humane, obviously, you know, and it's a lot better than the death penalty and things like that in terms of from a more liberal perspective. I think, I guess, you know. But obviously, yeah, I mean, from what it actually is, obviously, yeah, a place to put people who've broken the law and who we don't want in society, or who society decides they don't want in society. Which- Oh, yeah. But no, I mean, are we sort of delving into the sort of, you know, judicial system and kind of all that sort of stuff as well, or
There's so much. It's such a big
there's quite a lot.
topic.
Yeah,
There's so much.
Yeah,
it's
There
not
is-
unlike ethics, hey, or something
make
like
sure
that.
you
You know,
I know,
take
right?
some
I'm
notes, 'cause
surprised.
we're going to go into a few things. So I just start off by saying that the general consensus of prisons is that it denies freedom.
yes, that's a good. Probably should have thought of that. Freedom is the key, right? Yeah, or lack thereof.
No, but I mean, it's not. You just not think about what I mean by freedom. Not just freedom of movement, but freedom of other things.
Yeah, like staying
Oh,
up
for
till
sure,
whenever
yeah.
you want and eating the food you want, and
Seeing the people you want, yeah. Going the places you want to go after that. Oh no, we're back to
Doing
the,
anything.
the location one.
Yeah.
on mobile phones.
Oh, you're a prison of your own mind. Prison of your own mind.
Do you
That's the
think
thing.
that as we progress
Okay,
through
so-
time, prison
go
will
on.
get worse as phones are still not allowed? Because like as we become more and more reliant on just general downtime, full addictions effectively for mobile phones. Suddenly you go to prison, it's like, yeah, you're not allowed to go on Facebook, to browse the internet, to play games, anything like that anymore. And it's
Well, it's a little extreme, but I
worse.
mean, like, the lockdown has basically been like, if you took it super seriously, it's basically been home arrest, right? Like not going
Yeah.
outside, not having all the freedoms that you wanted to have before,
Mm.
like just being trapped in your house. Basically, that's what the whole country's experienced for the last feels like a rather long time.
Man,
So
these prisoners have got it easy. Offend a lot of people with that one.
But then,
Yeah.
Johnny, would you say that the converse?
yeah,
of
trigger
your
warning
point
for
is
everyone
that
listening to this
if
in
you're-
jail
And who's
or
been in
prison.
lockdown.
Yeah, Johnny, would you say though that the opposite is that if you're in prison but you're given your phone, it's not that bad? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying it's not that bad, but I know from things I've heard from like people talking about maybe just from the internet and people giving their life experience of prisons, of that it's not as I think obviously it depends on where you go and what the crime you commit. But a lot of people saying it's not like what you see on TV in the sense of everyone's always getting like, there's sexual assault as well as whatever. It's a case of it's just really boring that you've got nothing to do and you're just whittling away the time until you can get out. And yeah, people do get into fights and stuff like that, but it's the biggest thing was boredom for a lot of people that it doesn't stop and you're just waiting.
Okay, well, this ties into something that I find that I'm kind of quite passionate about. Well, I'd say passionate about, I think is interesting, is the idea of prisons, like the use of them, is for you guys more punishment or more for reforming?
That's interesting.
People now want it to be reformed, but realistically, it's punishment through and through. I don't believe it's even if people have it in mind for reform. Then why is it that you can do all the work you want in a prison? You'd be like, cool, I can now become a plumber. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to get employed by anyone because you're a prison because you went to prison, and it's like all the work that you do doesn't count up to anything. It's just to help either the prison or get you good brownie points to be released earlier. But your life after being in prison is going to be significantly worse, and it is. It's same with like criminal records. Having that is going to.
That's the system, though. That's not your fault.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
it's.
then it's like, oh, you can't have a job, so what are you gonna do? Probably return to crime, right? So then,
Yeah.
that is. It depends on the goal, right? If it's a, kind of a personal thing, or if it's a individualistic thing, or if it's a thing for what the state wants and what. Yeah, it's I don't know. There's quite a lot of layers to that.
Realistically, it's punishment, and the reform is what people want. But the same thing. Say somebody murdered your kid, a lot of people will be like, I don't care if they reform. I just want them to have punishment. Yeah, that's usually the person prosecuting them.
Yeah, there's the revenge, the desire for justice and revenge is kind of I think we could probably dabble into that as well, really.
Yeah,
But
but I think realistically, what everyone should want is reform because you want a better world. People make mistakes, however abhorrent, and if you think of it, if you don't want to forgive them and you only want them to have punishment, why not kill them? And I think that's not what I'm suggesting that you should do, but it's a case of you need to have reform and forgiveness because otherwise, what's the point? You keep going around in the circle because then you end up being just as much of a perpetrator. Say somebody killed somebody you knew, then you wanted to kill them, then you're only adding to the cycle. You're not trying to break that chain to be like, actually, a bit of forgiveness, a bit of reform, and try help stop people doing it in the first place by having better systems, and then also to actually have systems in place which says, you've done something wrong, but we're trying to believe that you can change, and we're going to help you do that, rather than be like, here's your punishment. When you come out, your punishment's for life, by the way. There's no, that's clearly something I was a bit passionate on.
I'm curious to get your take on this,
Do
Fred.
you have anything to add?
But yeah, again, I think it's kind of the ideal world, and then a bit of get hit by reality a little bit. I think it would be easy for me to say now, oh yeah, it's all about reform, and it's that's great. But then, like I say, if it was someone like someone killed your kid or killed killed someone you love, then I think there will be that kind of it will take a long time, I think, to get that forgiveness to actually be coming through. And obviously, there's there are so many more factors at play there, like in terms of I think a completely idealistic world
Well,
that we
you
oh yeah,
guys-
this would be great if we could do that, but but I think the reality of it is that it's not the way it is.
I was going to say it's a thing of it was I think it was a church service or something like that. It was talking about forgiveness, and it was saying like it's so easy. People say, oh yeah, I'm really forgiving, and it's if somebody does this, effectively you're talking about the hypothetical or you like minor things. Like so I found out at work somebody was stealing my coffee and it kept going down and down, but I forgave them, and and I think that take a bit. It's that kind of thing of being like it's easy in a first world place to forgive people because they're not actually big slights. But suddenly you say like, yeah, you're all about forgiveness, but if somebody kills your child, are you going to forgive them so easily as when someone stole your coffee? And it's that thing of the idealistic compared to the real, and it's you trying to, it's
Find a
reconciling
balance
that.
with that is incredible.
Okay,
Yeah.
can
Yeah,
I
I'll finish.
can I throw something in here that is just understandable because it's a lot. It brings out the passion in people when you talk about the far end of crime. For example, you just mentioned murdering a child, right? You both mentioned murder actually.
Mm.
This
Mm.
is not at all the majority of people in prison. Like I don't
Yeah.
know the numbers. I haven't looked it up. The people in prison are probably largely in there for petty crimes like theft or for drugs anyway. Just the sale of drugs is a long-term prisonable offence. When you haven't, if you take the real basis of what they've done, they've got a product and they've sold it. Whether they intended to harm or because they knew the risks, whatever, they just sold something, and that has put them in a prison for how many goddamn years. That is probably the majority of people in prison.
It's like
For
saying
them,
selling to underage.
surely reform.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 I mean,
okay,
at
yeah,
a
selling
pub.
to underage. Like it's
No, I mean,
unhelpful.
if you're at a pub and you sold to someone who's 17 and not 18, that's the same thing, isn't it? You're just selling an item. Sorry, carry on. You say you
No, I see
No,
what you
so
mean.
just
We jump straight to these people deserve it because they're the worst, but actually the people who are getting the similar, they're similarly being exposed to that, and obviously who definitely don't deserve the death penalty and everything. Yeah, it should obviously be about that reform, and I think from what I know of the prison system in the UK at least, it's like horrendously underfunded, and it's there's very little in terms of the reform, and there's very little funding, and there's very little effort put into that, from what I gather. Based on that, just basically a friend of mine did his medical internship in Leeds prison, I believe. And he said like every day someone got stabbed and someone overdosed on heroin, and it was like, so from a medical perspective, it was quite an interesting place to be. But yeah, it's pretty mad.
wow.
But yeah, obviously, I think obviously for the vast majority,
Because it definitely
but then
breeds that.
yeah, no, for sure.
Because it's how hard is it going to be? Because we chatted about this previously, of saying like for people who do abhorrent crimes, how on earth are you going to get funding from Joe Public to help them? Because all they're going to see is why should I help them? Just punish him, put him in prison. I don't care what happens to him. And like the same with prisons for funding, it's hard to get funding because you say what we want to do is to stop people committing crimes again. But it's like but we just want to punish them. We don't care. So I think I think it's such a shame of like people don't get the bigger picture. The more money you put into things to prevent crime, be it for like socioeconomic things, putting money into the lower areas and stuff like that, that's what's going to help you stop crime. Not building bigger prisons, not trying to it's kind of, it's like the fire's already happened and you're trying to put it out rather than trying to stop the fire in the first place. And again, it's the case of
classic.
imagine the house is on fire, but someone's like, they don't want to stop it again. They're just like, well, let's just put the fire out. Should we try to stop the fire happening again? No, I don't care. Just put it out when it's on fire. That's it. And that's without reform, and in prison, that's all that's happening. The fire starts, you put it out. This fire starts again.
Wow, that's a very good point. I'd like to move us on because I'm just going to cover a few topics here before we go off and look up stuff ourselves. And remember, keep in mind, the majority of people in prison have not necessarily done abhorrent crimes. Okay, keeping that in mind, do you think? I'm going to start with you, Alistair, that prisoners should have the right to vote.
That's interesting. Also, maybe I don't actually know if they do or not. That's actually quite. I don't actually know. That's definitely something to look up. I feel like they should. Yeah, I feel like it would be undemocratic for them not to. I think because there's still people with views on the world, and they still have they're still part of society, even though we've decided to take them out in this time. I think they should.
Yeah, see, I think I'll be probably not directly opposite. Well, I guess it is a yes or no thing, but I guess is if you're to have prison as a punishment.
Maybe.
Prison as a punishment, part of it is saying like, even if it is a lot of petty crimes, it's a case of you're taking your liberties away, and part of that is being part of the society that you live in. Not only are you taken away of it physically, but also in a case of your ability to affect it. I mean, if you could say, should people with criminal records not be allowed to vote? I'd say no, they should definitely be allowed to vote. But when you're in prison, I guess it's just one of those other things that to be like, it's hard because deterrents aren't that good most of the time. People just try to find a way of justifying it, so it's more of a case of, yeah. But I would say,
Oh, I think as well with with the history of voting, and like when you look at the history of like obviously people who couldn't vote before and who now can, and it's kind of like it's a human right now, right? And so I think the message you're putting out there to if you're saying to people, oh, you can't vote, and therefore that's you're sort of less than these people. And I don't know. I think that's maybe again not the thing we're going for.
you
But
could say that.
like I said, it should be a punishment, and it's obviously. But I don't know. Is your right to vote maybe it's something that you'd really care about more when it was taken away? Like
Yeah, I mean that's.
I don't know. It's
Thinking
it's interesting.
of, 'cause if it's meant to be a punishment, even if it's for reform, it could be a case of you could say it's not right to have prisons at all. Surely that's something which is like against human rights because you're changing somebody's autonomy. They like to do what they want to do anyway. So I guess if
Yeah. To be fair, if you said to someone, would you rather me take away your ability to go outside when you wanted, or take away your ability to vote? I think it's pretty obvious what most people would go for. So yeah,
I can run away then.
That's such a privilege that we can say that, right? I mean, I know I have friends from countries where potentially voting is suppressed, or it's definitely suppressed, and everyone knows about it. And like we have the privilege definitely to say, oh yeah, I'd rather be able to go outside. But so moving on with this point, and I'm tying in a few things here. So you both mentioned about how it's punishment, right? So surely, you have a kid, you punish them, the punishment has finished, and then you move on. And yet with our society, the punishment does not move on. You have that criminal record potentially permanently. Do you think that the record should finish when the punishment, is there a better punishment where the punishment finishes and it's just done? It's over? What do you guys think?
That's a tough one, right? Yeah, because obviously it's very different for different cases in terms of, this person's, we punish them in this way, have they actually changed, or have they just going to go and do the same thing again and again? So I think it'd be very difficult to make a blanket rule for that, like, oh yes, but then obviously it does need to be a blanket rule because it.
There is the protection for people with criminal records. There is actually rulings in place to say you don't actually have to disclose it on job interviews, dependent on time after spent, convictions or cautions. Dependent on some ones, I think if you do like money laundering, it's always you do like money laundering, assault, anything with like things like that nature. They're always going to show up because it's like I guess it's because as say if you're a parent, you punish your child. Your child may do it again, and they may need punishing again, but the government's not your parent, so how do they know? And that's with a criminal record. I guess that's
also, yeah. I think also it's more like a thing of like, say to go back to the kid example. Okay, your kid does something bad. Say your kid does something really, really bad, and then like they set fire to something, and then you could see it was deliberate. You could punish them, and then you'd move on, but you wouldn't forget that they did it. It would still be in your head, and I think maybe it's the not forgetting part that we actually want to do in terms of keeping the criminal record, because it is at the end of the day you did do that thing, and forgive but don't forget kind of thing. Exactly, because it's easy to say that in terms of a parent and a child, but then when it's just a person in society, then when otherwise it could just be too easy to just go and start a fresh slate and go do whatever you were doing before. Without the consequences for your actions. So yeah, I think I'd lean more towards.
But the consequences are meant to be the punishment, right? Yeah. That's the punishment was the consequence. That's all I'm getting at.
No, I don't think so. I think the punishment is a consequence. I don't think it's the only consequence.
Yeah.
Because all of your actions have consequences, right? And
I think
so yeah.
More of the same with like teaching kids finances and also teaching kids about the law and stuff. Because I knew somebody I worked with in a pub. I saying when he was like he's got a criminal record because when he was 16 he like smashed his mum's boyfriend's car or something, like destroyed it on the street. And maybe it's a case of educating your kids, because you say, oh no, they're not going to commit any crime, so it's fine. But making kids aware that if you do the wrong thing, prison could be a thing. More than likely that's not going to happen. But if you get a criminal record, that will follow you wherever you go. Usually, if you're under the age of 18, it does wipe out and depend on the offence itself, but it's still a case of, if we have a proper education on it, I'm not saying, people who are going to commit crimes sometimes are going to commit them anyway. I'm not also saying that's, you can't do anything about it, but, making it aware for minor offences to be like, actually, if you do that, you're not going to go to prison, but it will affect your jobs for the next 5 years, for instance. Something like that.
I think at the end of the day, people's future is what they care about, and so for a lot of people anyway. So I think that is it's a good deterrent. I think if you took it away, if you said, oh, you can do whatever crime and then it'll be gone in a year or 2 years or even 5 years, I think that would lessen the kind of the deterrent factor of what the the justice system kind of
biggest
is
I think the biggest way
upheld by.
to stop is over deterrence is definitely investment into people. So it's kind of like rather than making you scared of the consequences, I'm going to make you hopeful for the future. So it's like, rather than you thinking I've got no other future, I'm going to commit crime, it's like, oh, actually, because of whatever grant, whatever thing, whatever like apprenticeship, I can do this and I can earn more money than I would have anyway, or I'll have a better life for myself.
No, man, crime definitely pays. Crime definitely pays until you get caught.
White collar crime is just so good.
Well, it's nonsense of paying taxes as well. You just avoid all that, But no, I think
Yeah.
for sure, crime pays until it doesn't. Basically, doesn't it? It's the
definitely
high
think-
risk,
is it
super high risk,
that middle ground of where the least crimes are committed, of where people who are have down on the luck, where they don't have many options other than crime, and the people who are really, really, really high up on their luck that they can commit crimes, and it's like, I can just not pay taxes. I find a way to do this, or I can,
I don't know, I think it's more of like
the tax is the least of what they do.
for sure. I think it's just an example of like you say, a lot of people in jail and everything or in prison for drug offences, right? And I think it's an appealing job to a lot of people because it's it's very easy and it's very easy to make a lot of money at it very quickly. So the idea of would I rather be trapped in a 9 to 5 rather than do that? I don't know. I'm not advocating you go and sell drugs to any of our listeners, but no, I think that's probably a thought that goes through people's minds.
As an argument against, it's kind of like saying it's an easy way. It's like, well, I don't have to work hard. I can just do this. And it's kind of like, but I guess it depends on how you want to judge your life. Of did you get to where you are because it was easy, or because you wanted?
I think it depends how forward thinking you are as well. To be fair, it's not exactly if you're quite a fan of a long term plan, quite a fan of having a sort of longer, better future, then I don't think crime's going to be the one somehow.
Well, I was going to say, this is going to sum up. This is the last major point. Remember, obviously we have the second half, so you can write down all the things you want to talk about in depth. Don't forget, but it's going to tie into privatization. We have all these people. They're locked up for crimes of varying degrees. Why not benefit from them? Prison labour. That will lead on to privatization. So, do you guys know anything about prison labour? I don't really, but I have looked a little tiny bit into it. What do you guys know about prison labour?
I don't think it's I think there's a restaurant somewhere that's run by prisoners. I think it's called the Clink. I've heard of it, but I don't know if that's a reformed thing or if it's just I don't know. I feel like it's not a bunch of actual prisoners running a restaurant like that. It might be a recipe for disaster there, but no, I don't know very much about it at all. To be honest with you, I've got no idea yet.
Some things for usually, I think for most of all prisons will have some form of system where you're allowed to do jobs like the laundry or doing the food, stuff like that, which is just, to be honest, and it's not even a case, I think you usually have to be like a role model prisoner to get a job. It's not like everybody gets one. It's like, no, people who have shown, it's a reward effectively to an extent of, you get to do things because it's changed from the monotony, I guess.
But I feel like, you're more getting to the point of getting them to do things that would benefit society, right?
Because in California,
you guys are going to have the worst time when you research this. It is horrific.
Oh,
really? Go on. Give us a little teaser.
They had prison firefighters and they got paid 20 cents a day or something like that, or 20 cents a half a day, and they were people saving lives, doing whatever, and those are big hoo-ha because saying why aren't we paying them more? And it is slave labor effectively, and they're doing something which is a national service. But at the same time, why not? I just think you should have a job which you can say if you're a prisoner and be like, oh, we're going to teach you how to be a fireman, and after you come out of prison, you can keep that job. Done. Or we can teach you how to be an electrician, you'll do work around the prison, then you get to keep that job. And I just think that just makes the most sense, because then you're getting the most out of your prison force, and then you're improving your workforce after, and economy generally.
Yeah. Also, I thought you were totally going to pause and then say firefighter, because that's the probably right term these days, right? But then you were pause, and you were fireman. I'm going with it. Fire officer. Yeah, we'll go with that. That's funny.
It's like, what is it? It's only like white men who haven't learned that like there's other terms for it. So it's like only white guys are like policeman and woman.
Yeah,
Other
there's
people
a,
are
they
like, oh,
James Acaster sketch, right? Yeah, it's great.
It's a policeman officer.
When it's,
that's what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. No, I'm
Yeah.
really
That's
annoyed because
exactly
it's
who I
like
was
in my head.
thinking of.
It's not. What is it? What is it? Is I've applied to be a firefighter as well. But yeah, that was
yeah, that's good. Good.
That's
But yeah, go on. I am quite
Okay,
curious, Fred. So
well-
what was the take on that? Like, why is
just-
it so
I
much
haven't-
worse?
again,
as it were?
I haven't looked it up properly, and I'm looking forward to, in a bad way, I guess. I'm looking forward to seeing what's
I know
there to
you're
uncover.
morbidly curious.
But you
so,
see, yeah, prison labour. This is more about, I think, other countries, but I don't know. You're basically handed a workforce that you don't have to give any human rights to. And people, well, businesses take full advantage of this. From what I found, like there's horrendous things going on, and that's what I'm going to ask you guys to look up, so you can have a little peeky boo. If you'd like to, well, you'd have to note it down. I've got to write it to you guys in the chat. I'd like you to look up voting, because you didn't know about that, whether or not you can vote in prisons. That's
Organised.
quite a easy thing to Google. Yeah, excellent. I'd like you to look alternatives to prison, since you're both super down on punishment. Like maybe you like an alternative. I'd like you to look up prison labour. Just have a quick nosy on that one, and find out some fun facts that I'm sure are not very fun. And finally, maybe just take a little bit of self-reflection on prejudices you have for people who've gone to prison. Like if you meet someone who's been to prison, like how do you feel? I mean, I remember the first time I did meet someone who I worked with who had been to prison, and I remember being at first, oh my god, oh my god, it's a prisoner fix, and like,
Oh,
you know,
right,
getting
I've got
to
all
know
hot
them.
on, do I call it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And-
All these Australians.
so like, you always think prison, you think murderer, and it's like that is such a small percentage. What was it? Something like a recent statistic was like of the male population of like 17 million or whatever there is, it's like 0.1% are murderers. I was like, yeah, when you look at the base stats of how many people are in a place and how many murderers, it's tiny, absolutely tiny percentage. The rest is, yeah, petty crime, whatever. I guess assault is a bigger thing as well. And fraud.
They're all baddies, though.
Yeah, fraud. I mean, but you have to get caught for fraud.
Or are they?
I'm not
Yeah,
for
well, that's the
But
thing.
anyway.
Something
it's
that
just
we didn't.
for reform. I just believe
Well-
people are bad when they don't think they want to punish people. But, oh, about reform? No, you're not. You're about punishment when you should be about reform. That's my thing. More about.
Well, the thing is that we didn't get into it. Is like you're not you. I'm saying you, as in you're the population.
What are you talking about?
Like forgetting that like reform assumes that you're the one with the right idea. Like, oh no, done that, and we know that you shouldn't have done that, and so we're going to reform you. I mean, think about 1984 kind of stuff that you could get into. Keeping this PG.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, was there anything you guys would like to? Is there anything you guys would like to add about my topic of prisons before you go away?
No, I think we're getting good at picking topics. This is,
Yeah.
this is a cool one. I like this.
Well, one thing I do want to say is in America, of like the difference, same with the hospitals and stuff, when you privatise it when it's government funded, there's a big difference between making money and saving money. In America, it's like we want more prisoners because the government pays us money to house prisoners. We don't really care, we just want more and more. Whereas, say, in the UK, it's like we want less prisoners because it costs us money, and you're like, we're the ones paying. And I think it's definitely some things, be it private, some things being government. Definitely, healthcare and prisons should be government run, because that's a case of you wanting to save money, and that's the hope of you wanting to make everyone healthy and have less people in prison. I guess the worry is with less money, of case of prisons, there's loads of people here anyway, but you don't want to spend any money, so how are you going to help them? And same with hospitals, if you want to save money or everything you can do, are you doing the best job?
Yeah, exactly. Well, just that. I'm sorry I didn't get onto your point of privatisation. I mean, we will in the second half. I can guarantee.
I look that up as well.
Okay.
I bet.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining me first half. be running off now to Google away for the week, and we'll join you guys at home listening to these fascinating topics just after the break.
Hey listeners, if you've made it this far and you have anything, maybe a product, another podcast, a charity that you'd like us to pop into our halftime interlude, please let us know at noideayetpodcast@gmail.com.
And welcome back after the break. It's been a few seconds for you, and it's been over a week for us because I messed up. And I'm here with the guys who've been spending their week Google filming and have learnt a lot on the subject of prisons. So, I've got two eager beavers in front of me with reams of notes. I don't think I actually specifically set questions, did I?
You did.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Oh, because I went back
Rights
and
to
tried
vote,
to listen
prison
to
labour, fun
good.
facts that aren't fun. I wasn't sure where you're going with that. Alternatives
Oh.
to prison, thoughts on prejudices for people who've been to prison, and the privatisation of prisons.
Oh, there you go. Because I've got all my
As
notebooks
you probably
in
know
front
that
of me.
because we heard it about 20 seconds ago on the podcast.
Oh man, screw you. I just have to start again then, won't I?
I only googled one thing, and
That's
that
fine.
was the definition of prison. The rest I did. My brother, who's been to about 40 prisons, he's got a Christian theatre company, so he goes inside prisons and doing theatre.
You might want to open with
No,
that.
he's
My
not.
brother's been in about 40 prisons. He's, so he
And
just,
then-
they just, he's too bad for all of them.
And then
Oh,
my
I gotta get rid of that guy.
who she does witness support in courts as well as actually doing social work where she went into prisons. So it's quite nice because we've got one side which is focusing on the prisoners, and like my brother, and he obviously went into, kind of benefit him in some way, whereas my mum's on the other side where she deals with the victims a lot and then the prisoners to be. And so it's quite cool getting the two different sides of it and their kind of opinions on it.
Wow. Okay, wait, hang on. So, Alistair, did you look up a group of things that I asked about? I don't know how many you got into.
I did.
Okay, cool. So
I
how
tried.
about John, if you'd like to start us off with the definition of a prison, that'd be pretty cool. Just
Yeah,
as he takes a
I
big
Googled.
bite of cake or something.
So I said this to because I'll preface a bit. Say I asked both my mum and my brother what they thought the definition of prison was, and when I said the definition, my brother said maybe it's a little bit outdated for what it is nowadays, but at least the definition is a building in which people are legally held as a punishment for a crime they have committed or while awaiting trial. So punishment,
Interesting.
which
Yeah,
I
because
thought was like mad.
yeah, that's something that popped up in the stuff I looked up. Was that it's not always like prison and jail. We think are kind of the same thing, but jail is just a holding facility, right? Like it's not actually the punishment. You're just being held somewhere for potentially to await something, or you're going to be punished later. I mean, in medieval times, jails were just a house where people had to sit, maybe sleep there for a bit while they waited for trial or whatever. And then nowadays, like the prison is the whole thing. It's the whole system. But I don't know if there's obviously there's going to be huge different styles in other countries, right?
Yeah, so I think there'll be a lot of different definitions of what a prison is depending on what era you're at. And
Yeah. Also, yeah,
what
Roman
culture.
times.
I think obviously we're going to get into this anyway, but it's definitely something that just cropped up there. What you're saying, so sort of the notion of punishment being sort of to do with vengeance and retaliation. That's apparently been around in civilization since the ancient Sumerians, apparently. So the whole idea of it being a sort of vengeance and getting a revenge on the person who's done a crime as the punishment. So obviously that versus rehabilitation, I think, is probably the central focus of what we were kind of talking about last week and what we were.
Where's the line
Go for
between
this one.
justice and revenge? I mean, I really think, to be honest, they're one of the same thing realistically, but I guess the difference is revenge will probably lead you further than the actual justice. So the justice they get,
What about
just deserves,
as a
and then
parent,
revenge is, over.
Not even a parent, if you're a pet owner or something, punishment inverted commas is because you're trying to get them to do the right thing. You're not avenging the dog because it weed in the house. You're trying to punish it lightly so that it learns.
Are you not?
No.
Because are you not annoyed that weed in the house?
Well,
Otherwise,
that's
you
the
would
thing. No,
punish
it's
it
the
because it's fine.
rehabilitation versus again that's the core of it, right? Is what you're going for. I think it can coexist potentially, but obviously I think your feelings towards a dog who we on the carpet and someone who's committed some heinous crime probably different. But
So
and again, obviously, how heinous are the crimes that people go to prison for? That's the other the other little thing that we were talking about, I believe, last week.
So the one bit of research I did was after watching a film, went on to Channel 5, and it was the world's most luxurious prisons, which is in Norway. It's called Halden's Prison. And one of the...
Nice.
I can go a bit more into it, but one of the good takeaways from it is Norway said, we don't have the death sentence, we don't really have life sentences either. So when someone goes to prison, you know for a fact they're coming back out. So why wouldn't you rehabilitate somebody? Yeah, you can need the punishment side because they've done something wrong, but they're going to come out into the society. So either do you want them back into prisons, which again, to get back into prison, they've got to commit a crime. That's going to be against somebody. That's a bad thing. And also, it's taxpayers' money. It costs money to have people in prison. So spend a little bit of money first to rehabilitate, so then you don't need to do it again. And then it's like, cool, we can forget about them. Obviously, you'd probably be on some kind of list or whatever, register.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that kind of again that ties into the other thing we were talking about last week, and the thing about prison labor, right? Is that one of the things you wanted to touch on before I do with the?
Yeah, well, definitely like what people think about the reasons for going to a prison, like and what they should be doing in there.
So what was your guys' take on the prison labor as a basically? I think it's fairly obvious what it's going to be like. It's going to be pretty monotonous. It's going to be pretty, it's going to be companies using very cheap labor, and obviously if they were regular people, it would be considered probably like
if
not work that you'd want to do. If they were regular people, if they were if they were not in prison, if they were not convicted criminals, then there would be. I feel like we're already getting into some stuff here, which is good. But yeah, I think obviously then they're going to be, not going to want to do the jobs, or they're not. It would be considered. I don't know, like how obviously you don't want it to be inhumane work, but you don't want it to be necessarily. It's not going to be the most rewarding work, right? Obviously, so I don't know, because a lot of the stuff that I read about it was like, oh, it's very monotonous, very very dull work, and it's like, well, is that not the kind of the point of prison? Like, it's very monotonous, very dull. That's kind of the point. So I don't know. What was your take on the prison labor thing, and like how bad it is for people, and how if it's like I don't know, like what was your take on it?
So like I've had two sides. One was the Norway thing, and that was a case of where the jobs they have are actually they're trained towards qualifications. So they get a qualification of mechanics. They can leave prison and become a mechanic, and it's not a case of like it's just you work while you're in prison because it's something to do. It's a case of no, the rehabilitation is giving you a job in prison, which is then transferable skills outside of it. But then talking to my brother about it in British prisons, it's a case of only good people get jobs. You've got to work up for them, and it's a bit of a privilege to have them. And then some things that actually can work quite well. So it's a case of, they can have like chefing, or like, you're saying of one prisons is that the prisoners, they'll do the cafeteria for the visitors as well as the prison mates, and they're proper chefs, and they make the menu and they sell whatever. And apparently one of them, I'll see where it is. So it's Berwyn Prison in Wrexham. It's an experimental prison. It was meant to have 2,000 people when completed. Only got to 1,200. And it was one of the
not
few
enough people
prisons which
committing
had
crimes.
a phone and a shower inside the cell, so you had it 24/7. But they had custom-made pies to sell. Prince Charles even endorsed it, but they couldn't make a prison because they couldn't make a profit because they're a prison. But it's a case of, so they even had a good thing to do, but they just, because of the things based on it, that they weren't able to make any profit. So it's kind of like, it's not as practical outside. But yeah, so it's enjoyable work. And also, one thing of, you think, oh, you get paid absolute peanuts. Maybe you'll get like 20 quid in a month or something. But you got to think of your expenditure. When you're in prison, why would you be earning 7 quid an hour? Like, what are you going to spend it on? Your life outside, but you're meant to be punished inside prison. So your expenditure, you got a prison shop. And so it's a case of you work to earn that. So if you think your usual wage, most of it goes on bills or whatever. Those bills you don't have in prison. So the rest is just spending money. So it makes sense of why you don't get paid a full wage in prison, because you don't need to have a full wage.
No, but this ties back to what Alistair was saying about you were saying about how in Norway, like the idea is that they come out. Like, what's wrong with them looking forward to getting out and actually earning something to prepare them for when they come out, they can continue? Like, if you know what I mean.
Well, no,
like,
you've got to remember, it's got to be a bad thing. It's got to be bad enough to make people not want to do it. If it was a viable alternative to let you work, it wouldn't work as a system, would it? Like, it has to be bad. This is kind of the point I was making about the monotonous work. It's like, yeah, it would be, and obviously it would be, and obviously in a perfect world, you'd want people to have to get more qualifications and get better jobs and be able to be a more more contributing to society and everything. But there's got to be a balance between it's also got to be bad enough that people don't want to do it, because it's that's the point of prison, right? It's got to
Can't
be
have it like a
a
military where
punishment.
it's like, cool, I'll go away, everything's paid for me, my accommodation, my food, and when I come back, I've got a little like nice pocket of money that I haven't spent.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
no, you should commit a crime
Yeah,
and be able to
and
have
they're
a
a
savings
better
account.
person. I'm all
But
for
you-
people being better people
Oh
afterwards.
yeah, but you learn a skill while you're in there. The hopes is, say if you become a chef, it's like you learn that which is applicable for the outside, not the money side, because you, for all intents and purposes,
Well, yeah.
they're just going to make a drug empire.
Exactly. There's a very bad. Obviously, there's a very obvious connection between if they do have completely monotonous work and they don't have any qualifications coming out again, they're going to be okay. What do I want to do? Monotonous work and earn no money, or go back to crime and earn loads of money until I get caught again. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really, isn't it? So yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of monotonous work out there that sucks, and it's not prison. That's all. I just-
exactly. So yeah, so the continuation of that be, well, it shouldn't be that good then, because obviously, like I say, if people are doing it when they're not in prison, then obviously the prisoners shouldn't have it better than people who aren't in prison, right? Obviously, I feel like we were on this. Maybe
I
were
just-
we in agreement about that or not?
I don't know, but I just think it all ties back to the purpose of the prison. I'd like
So-
the prison to be rehabilitation. You guys want it to be punishment.
No, I think Johnny's quite keen on the. I think I'm leaning more towards a punishment than Johnny is personally, from what we've talked about so far.
It wasn't until talking to my brother who goes in and he's chatting with the prisoners and stuff like that. For him, it really came to being that you need to have a rehabilitation, because why wouldn't you have it? And then the Norway one, it's effectively like better than a hotel. You apparently have dental twice every 2 weeks, and it's like that's better than most people just normally. Like they have better conditions.
See a
You've got
dentist every
music-
2 weeks.
Yeah, something mad like that.
What?
It's not even like it's crazy.
You don't even need
It's
to.
like a dentist that comes in and like.
They're like, well, what's your diet? I'm just kidding. I know exactly what your diet is because you're in prison.
But,
What are you gonna do?
This is
the biggest
outraged.
Initially, it was like an experimental big prison. It cost millions, and it cost millions. It cost a lot to run as well, but the UK, the reoffender rate after 5 years is 70%. So 70% of people who go to prison and come out, they will reoffend in 5 years. In the 60s in Norway, it was 60%, so very similar. Now it's a 25% rate after 5 years. So that which is just mad. It's kind of like you.
Is that because they never leave because they've just got a better life in prison? Just never leave.
But like, is Anna Widdecombe, who's a Conservative MP, who went to the prison. So she was like, she was very much for the idea of sorting prisons out, being an MP, because you need to have him. And it was the takeaway thing was some of the practice they did were great. Some of them, did you need to do it? Is it a waste of money? And really, more data needs to come out to prove that these kind of luxurious prisons are worth it. But part of it could be the relationships the guards have with the prisoners. They said in 10 years they had 4 suicides. I think it's 10 years, and like they really hit hard with all the prisoners and the guards, because it was really sad. In the UK, 100 people commit suicide in prison a year, so it's kind of like just mad the differences between. And yeah, it seems a lot better. But then, and he's saying about between the rehabilitation, that seems the best thing, because they're going to come back out. So why wouldn't we? We're not going to kill them. And I kind of believe, for me, if you don't believe in reformation, then why not just have the death penalty? Because it's a waste of money otherwise. So like, for me, I believe in reformation. But I think if you say you just want prison for punishment, or you never want them to come out, or you don't care about them reforming, then why wouldn't you just have a death sentence? I just don't see, because all you're doing is you're wasting money for them to rot in prison until they die and be a huge waste of money, or you're just waiting for them to come back out of prison to only go back into it, and not, you're just having the cycle, aren't you?
I mean, let's.
No, I do agree with you. Obviously, the reformation is super important. I definitely in agreement with you about that. I just mean that there is, you've got to make a line of it. It can't be too good, because
Well,
that's the whole
it.
point. But yeah,
Chatting to
not
my
that I
mum-
think it is good necessarily. Like I said, I don't think it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's good, but I was just saying, in terms of
Yeah.
go on,
Chatting to
sorry.
my mum, who does witness support, of like the things you hear, and like she has to deal with the victims of like abuse and assault and everything like that, and she's like, no, they deserve punishment. They deserve to have something to know that what they've done is wrong. And I think the biggest thing is people need to be aware that they've done something wrong and take accountability. Because I heard this podcast which was about an assault, and it was speaking to both people, and the woman who was assaulted, she was actually really good about it and was like forgiving as well, whereas the guy himself, he's blaming everyone else for what he did. He's blaming, it's because of this, it's because of that, it was really bad what I did, but he's not taking accountability. He's blaming everyone else, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what, before you can reform, you need to be aware of what you've done and to take hold of that. To be like, yeah, I did that and I shouldn't have. rather than being like, I'm sorry. But yeah, so it's I definitely I'm on both sides to being like, at
Well,
the end of the day, someone's done something horrible, and you should have some justice. And then
yeah,
on the flip side, you need to have reform, otherwise they'll just do it again, and there's no justice.
you are forgetting there is one other side to it, but it's not really something in England, and that is private prisons make money.
Make money, yeah. I looked into this a bit, yeah, and it's mental, right?
Would you like to give a little insight into what you found?
What I got. So the whole thing of it, obviously, a lot of it leads back to, especially coming articles I read, very much the whole like big evil corporations and how it's all evil and it's all terrible, and they take advantage of prisoners, they do all the rest of it, and everyone knows that all these massive corporations are really really bad. But yeah, so this guy Tom Beasley, he's like the head of the CCA, right, in the US, which is like they run all the prisons basically, and it's like they make a lot of money out of it. Like they make a crazy amount of money. There's like big events where they have all these companies come and like sell different. Oh, we can make you these handcuffs. We can make you these jumpsuits. Blah blah blah. And it's it's like it's really really big money. Like terrifyingly so. So like not really surprised, but they had to have like quotas of amounts of prisons they had to get and keep. And like if they didn't meet those quotas, then they might, basically they say it didn't matter how good you were as a prisoner, they needed X number of people to be in these prisons. And I think there was one that had an issue because they are only 92% capacity or something, and it was just, I don't know, it's mental. But yeah,
Well, because what I didn't understand was that so a lot of the money's made just from them basically undercutting how the government would do it. So they say to the government, right, we can run a prison cheaper than you can. And the government's like, right, how much is it going to cost us? So you say, right, I'll charge you $100 a day per prisoner, which is pretty standard, I think. Like plus bills, plus this, plus that, so it comes to, let's say, $200 a day, and that's how we can run it on that. So the government gives your private business $200 a day to keep people locked up in cages, and then you cut as many corners as possible to keep as much of that money as you can.
Yep.
Oh,
that's terrible. That's right. If anyone was wondering, the CCA is Corrections Corporation of America. Sorry, I didn't say that when I was saying. But yeah, no, it's terrible basically, and like I mean, it's not a secret that these companies are fueled by greed, which I think is the root of an awful lot of these issues.
So Johnny, you have family members who have insider knowledge of what it's like in the prisons.
Well, yeah. So I asked my brother about this. So I asked questions of, is prison for punishment reform, what prison labour, prejudice of inmates, and funding and private. And he said there's this company G4S, and they're actually security technically. They're a security company and they do prisons.
Yeah, I know them. I know that company.
Yeah, and apparently he said when you go in, most of the time you wouldn't really know if it's private or government funded a lot of the time. He said realistically there isn't a huge difference, minus branding and uniform. So I think he said prisoners may be able to tell the difference, but he said as somebody going inside, he said to be honest he wouldn't really know the difference between the two. He said it's probably similar to like a private hospital and NHS,
Yeah, but you can tell the difference then sometimes.
Yeah, that's probably not the best example, but that kind of thing of it's not. Yeah, they probably make more money and they probably have you probably get paid more, I imagine. So maybe it's like for the staff of NHS or prison, NHS or prison, NHS or private is like you get paid a bit more money. Maybe you have better rotas or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you say government needs to cut corners as much as not cut corners, but make it as cheap as possible because it's tax money, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's not profit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But yeah.
I've learned about different categories as well, if you want to hear about that. So you get Cat A, B, C, and D. Category A is max security. It's for the worst offenders. Category B is high security, and it's for serious offenders. I think it's kind of as they go to A, B, you can get moved around. Cat C, my brother's saying there's a huge variation, to be honest, between how lax or how highly secure it is. And it could be for anywhere from... So Cat C could have somebody who's got very minor offences, but they've got an explosive personality. So you're just a little bit dangerous. And then you get Cat D, which is low security and also includes open prisons. So, it could be you've gone from a Category A and although it doesn't happen a lot, but you're going to be released back into the real world. And so you go down to a Category D. You probably go for A, but you go down a bit. But it's usually Category D is for when people are finishing their sentences and it's a lot more relaxed. So but they're saying usually in some, I think this place it was in the Isle of Man, and it's where like loads of sex offenders go, I think, because they don't work well anywhere. And it was like I think it was an open prison, or it was category D or something like that. I can't remember. And they're saying that like usually in prison, whenever you go, they open a gate, you go in, they close the gate behind you, and you do that, and everything's like that. If you need the toilet, they lock you in and out of the toilet, kind of thing. And they said they went to this one, and someone said, "Oh, would we be able to go to the toilet?" I said, "Yeah, let's just go through that wing." So he just opened the door, went in, and then he was on the wing of a prison, and he asked one of the prisoners to where the toilet was, and he's like, "Yeah, it's just over there." And it was like, so the differences you get is mad. Obviously, it's all dependent on the prisoners as well.
That was something that popped up that I found. This was, again, a lot of the stuff was very American orientated, I guess. But it was like that doesn't matter what your crime is particularly, you're just put into a certain category of prison based on what basically a panel of judges decide. So this also is negative in the sense that if your crime is, let's say, you were addicted to drugs and you committed crimes to get money for those drugs, the prison that you get sent to is based on A, how dangerous they think you are, based on prejudice, and B, won't necessarily have like a rehabilitation centre for drugs. Some will,
mad.
but some won't. But they don't take into account your needs, which maybe is something that would be important.
I think, yeah, all this does come a lot into it of like, how nice we treat them and how and as a society we've decided. I think one of the things that's kind of surprised me about actually when it came up on this, again with the UK, was about, which you asked last week or on the first half, was about prisoners' right to votes. Did you guys check that?
Yeah. What did you
'Cause it's
find
crazy.
anything out about that? I actually haven't looked that up.
So basically, the UK law is that if you've served a custodial sentence after your conviction, you cannot vote in any elections ever.
Oh, like
Like-
they're right.
No, period. Like,
Forfeit.
and it came from something. Basically, it's sort of it's Act in 1870 that came about, and it was the disenfranchisement of prisoners, basically. So like the idea of prisoners being this kind of sub level, then it's just goes back to this whole thing of it's the civic death, and it was just kind of this like idea that once you've been sent to prison, you are less than the other thing, which I think is absolutely mental. But yeah, so that's obviously, like I said, that dates back to 1870. But yeah, it's just like, yeah, you can't. From what I gather, I'm pretty sure I did check this, and it was like, yeah, you can't vote again if you served a sentence. It's like, no.
Any sentence, like, it's not like that's how bad.
I think they had some, because it was basically the EU had a problem with this, and they kind of brought that up in the late in 2002, I think it was. I think it said. Yeah, they basically said, what the UK is doing here is inhumane and is wrong, and the UK were like, no, we're fine. We're gonna
Take it
keep
away.
doing it.
You're right. That is madness.
But I mean, you are taking away someone's rights to a far greater extent. You're literally taking away their right to do anything they want to do, right? So the right to vote is I think we think of it as very important and very kind of like, oh, everyone should have it, especially after how much sort of the trials and tribulations people who didn't have it have gone through to get it. It is this thing of like, oh, it's a human right now. But then, like I said, where would you put it in a similar? I think if you told most people, would you like the right to be free or the right to be able to vote? I think most people would obviously value their freedom above their ability to vote. But
in our countries of the West, right, where
Oh, exactly.
we don't
Yeah.
like.
yeah, well,
have-
I said we take
dictators.
right. Yeah, exactly.
well,
Obviously,
something,
plenty of developed countries where you can't vote, like China, obviously being a good example.
something that ties into this that I found was like that certain things like the three strikes law and like certain things that pop up like this come from something happening in the media, people getting really angry about it and wanting harsher sentences and harsher this and harsher that, and getting really riled up, and it just makes a negative spiral. So that three strikes was because someone who was an offender before was released and then redid a bad thing.
Reoffended. Yeah.
Reoffended, that's it. And so people were like, this is an outrage, right? That's it. we should really, really push it to the now. Obviously, like, you only hear about the worst stuff, right? Because that's what media feeds off. But like the idea, that imagine something bad happens in the news, and so then the British public are like stirred into a frenzy. Let's take away their right to vote.
That's obviously people love a witch hunt, don't they? And then that's only got worse with the
Yeah.
internet and everything else. So pretty mental.
5 sentences of they've only given a few out, but it was apparently called IPP. It used to be that was what you could give to serious offenders, and it would be a no term time. so you wouldn't have any, and it only goes to a parole board. So effectively, hypothetically, it's a life sentence because you say like, we haven't given you a date for when you're meant to be released. You're just going to see a parole board every now and then to decide whether or not you'll be released. So it's an effective life sentence. But they found it's increased suicide rate and overpopulation, so they abolished it in 2012 because it was like people keep killing themselves and we really need to have the space.
Imprisonment for public protection. That's what the IBP is.
I imagine judges can probably give multiple sentences. Manchester Moore's murders, I feel they gave him like an effective life sentence, but I don't know if it's probably changed since then.
It's like, I don't know, with no chance of parole and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I think that's an American thing. But yeah.
Did either of you look up certain types of prisons, like a special? I mean, you got women's prisons, youth prisons, psychiatric prisons, prisoner of war. Anyone look up any of those types?
I just learned about the categories, and then also that some you get effectively the sexual assault prisons, whereas like we don't trust these people with any. It'll be like minor offences and then sexual assault kind of thing because they just can't trust them to put them in general population because like nobody likes them effectively, you know.
Well, I don't think I said this last week, but it was something that always resonated with me. It was this guy who came when we were at school in like year like secondary school, like sort of year 10, 11, so sort of 15, 16 years old. This guy came to our school and he gave us he gave basically a sort of lecture about he'd been to prison in the US. He'd written books about it and stuff. And he had this thing, which I don't know if it really sort of resonated with me. It's like, well, not resonated, but it was like, I think it was deliberately very shocking. And it was, it was like sort of one of his catchy things. I Googled it last week. Well, no, catchy. Okay, that's the wrong one. You know what I mean? Like, it was one of his sort of things that he was like kind of coined almost, because I looked it up and the only like instance I could find of it online was him saying it in his book and stuff. Sean Atwood, his name is, I think. Anyway, he basically did this thing about KOS and SOS. Did I mention this? I can't remember, but basically it was like, if you've done any sort of crime that was like deemed bad in the eyes of other prisoners, so not terrible but bad, like sort of like drive-by shootings and like sort of cowardly crimes, as it were, if you like, in the eyes of other prisoners, they have SOS, which is smash on sight, which is basically when you come through the prison gates and all the other prisoners beat you up, basically. And then they have KOS, which was kill on sight, which was for like paedophiles and anyone who's done anything against women. They literally walk through the prison doors and everyone in there who's like obviously had that whole system where they like get the like the more crimes you do inside the prison, the more respect you get within the prison and stuff. So they literally just murder people as soon as they walk through the doors, as soon as they come through to prison. So if you get arrested for that sort of thing in the US and get sent to these maximum security prisons, you're effectively just getting a death sentence.
Oh my
Which
God.
again, I couldn't find that much evidence backing this up, but it was obviously really shocking and really like, damn, like, But again, it's what the media loves, and it's what when you think of prison, like we were saying last, I think it's really important to remember that is such a small minority of of people in prisons, right? And it's obviously far more attention grabbing, it's far more newsworthy. But
I think the thing which could lead into is I asked about like brother, because you work in prisons, of what would you say for meeting a prisoner on the outside and that kind of prejudice that we naturally would have. And it is obviously you worked with people who've done whatever. I said, like, realistically, no, I probably wouldn't treat them any differently, but it'll be something in the back of your mind, like.
Oh, for sure.
And it is, you still, because chatting to, so many people are just regular people. I mean, like, Abby, she's treated people. I think like it was a rapist or something like that. She's treating as she was a nurse, and it's like, he was a really nice guy. He was really friendly, and you wouldn't have had any clue about it whatsoever. And I think that's it. I'm not saying that people do apparent things, but that's half of that's definitely them.
If in terms of like prejudice, is it as bad as sort of like obviously we think racism is bad? It's like fundamentally you're judging someone based on the colour of skin. It's without any reason, everything else. But is prejudice towards prisoners, is that the same? Because obviously you're sort of saying, don't judge someone for what they look like or anything, judge them for their actions. That's quite a popular opinion, right?
Well,
so you are judging someone for their actions and what they've done in the past. So is it? Yeah.
Just because they're a prisoner, you hate them, even though they may have done whatever crime.
It's not about hate, but in terms of treating them differently, you probably would, I think, and it's just because, like I said, they are.
Like, well, they chose to do the thing, but then the other side is you don't know the whole story.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
I mean, there's always two sides. When you've been in a room, you've watched something happen, and then you hear people talk about the thing, and you're like, that's not what happened at all. Like, it's twisted completely. So, yeah, it'd be hard, but you always would judge someone if they'd gone to prison, but you wouldn't know the story. But that's just life, isn't it?
Your brother had a good example. So like, it's like hearing someone was an alcoholic. It's like, okay, I'm still going to treat you as you were, but I'm going to be aware of that. So yeah, maybe you won't drink in front of them, or maybe you won't do that. And it's kind of you just being aware of that in the back of your mind.
Not do a crime in front of
I'm
them.
not gonna drop any soap in front of them.
Being aware of it and like, yeah, it's still normal, but I guess
That actually was. I just remember one quite funny thing with that when we had that guy coming to school. This again very 15, 16-year-old humour, but it was like he said he did his whole talk right, and then at the end he was like, any questions, and there was about well over half the people in the room had their hands up, and then he asked one guy, and the guy was like, oh, so yeah, did you ever like when you're in the showers like drop the soap? And literally, then when he went, he answered it sort of, oh yeah, that's funny, yeah, that's the question I get the most. Then when he had any other questions, like most of the hands had gone down at this point. Like everyone just was going to ask them, or some variation of that. But yeah, that's funny. But yeah, it was quite interesting actually. He was good. Like I said, he got done for like basically stock market dodginess and drug dealing.
White
So
collar
nothing.
crime.
Yeah, like
Kind of.
well, yeah, sort
Rich
of white
people
collar.
crime.
Rich people crime, partying too hard, and then and he had some contacts on the inside. So that's how he sort of. But he was in this sort of very
But I mean, that what you're describing then about having someone coming to see exposure, like things that you're not exposed to that you probably should be exposed to. Not saying what prison's necessarily like, but like, I mean, when I was working in this small town in Spain, like these kids hadn't met someone who was foreign before. Like you need to be exposed to like other people and ideas so that you don't just listen to stuff on the news and think, oh, that's the way it is. They're like, prisoners aren't all evil people who look like pirates. Like you have to understand.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah,
I think it was a good thing, to
yeah,
have that guy.
the thing about it saying like, they don't all like whatever, and like obviously, hearing of going to prisons, like people, you don't have this kind of classic stereotypes come in all shapes and sizes. You have no idea what crime somebody has done when you meet them. It's only talking to them that you realise. Although my brother did say he went to one prison with like, I think it was paedophiles, and he said one guy, he just looked like a paedophile. He had the big glasses, he had a mustache, and he was wearing terrible clothes. And I was like, why? Why are you dressed?
Wait, was it a prison and he was throwing trouble? I suppose they do.
Yeah, I think because it was like one of the lower ones, so you kind of maybe
Oh,
how he was
man.
wearing his clothes, like tucked in shirt, like way up high or whatever.
Does he do it to be more the part? Like, or does that? Is it based on?
Is it like
him?
the stereotypes are a stereotype for a reason? Is it he was, yeah. That's
Sorry, I'm just reading through my notes. One job you can have in prison. So in the UK, you don't have enforced labour at all. And so one of your punishments can be taking your job away, actually, and they all pay. One of the most lucrative jobs in prison is drug dealing and prostitution. And trans people, depending on what, I think it's still not, they haven't fully decided. This is not me making a very generalization, but obviously kind of like there'll be prostitutes within prison. And I mean, if you are a trans person and if you are so inclined to do that, make so much money doing that. Like a colossal amount of money.
But like,
And so-
how
'cause
do
he's-
you get the money? Is it on the
Because
outside?
people they'll still work within prison and things like that. And I think
there's a whole economy, I think, within the
when they
prison.
work,
Sure.
Yeah. And so it's a case of my brother went in and he said like there's one effectively he said like when looking quickly you're like, oh man, is there just a woman in prison? I was like, oh wait, no, I get it now. Okay, fair enough. Well, as you get a bit closer, I think one of the prison ones was like, yeah, they make a colossal amount of money in here. Like they just, if they want to, mad.
Oh, I don't know how I feel
Never
about
really
that.
think.
Don't know how I feel
Yeah, I'm
about
not
that.
like.
Fair
Same
play
for,
to
like,
him.
if you're like
I guess.
a young 18-year-old guy straight into prison, and if you were so inclined,
Like twink.
Yeah, effectively.
Did either of you look up anything on the alternatives to prison? Just curious if you found
I
anything.
mean, yeah, we sort of touched on the death penalty, right? Which obviously is a terrifying one. but-
Alternative death.
Yeah, there's only the
Straight
two,
up
that's it,
murder.
yeah. Like I said, obviously there's other punishments, right? Like sort of, but they tend to be like lesser alternatives, like the sort of the things that you get if you're not bad enough, or if you don't, if they deemed, like I said, like community service or house arrest and things like that, which obviously is an alternative, but it's not.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that's like we obviously have as a society haven't come up with anything that's a viable alternative, really.
Yeah, my mum did one thing which was part of it was like a new thing they were doing, which was I can't remember the term they used. Effectively, it was where for less, I think even quite big crimes as well, they'd have it where I think kind of a way which you can be more appealing towards the judge whenever you come for parole and stuff is where as the you meet with the victim and then you talk through it. My mum said a nice story of where this guy, probably 19, burgled an old woman, and she, with the conversation, and then they have a conversation together. I can't remember if it's over the phone or whether it's like, you're in a kind of box or whatever, and saying that her biggest thing, she was burgled when she was out of the house, and so it's not nice because you don't feel safe in your own home, because when I'm out of, you don't feel safe leaving your home either. And so one of the biggest concerns she had was just what happened with the dog, because the dog was home, and he said, I got some ham out of the fridge and I fed it and it was fine. She's like, oh, that's nice. And she's like, he's just 19, he's just a kid, he's just doing something stupid for whatever reason, like he's got the rest of his life. I don't want to damn him because of a stupid mistake when you're young. And other things that work, so even the harder ones, like the bigger crimes, of a case of meeting that, and it's kind of like your mum said, some people you clearly see they're just all fake. They don't care that they committed a crime. They've got no intention of trying to reform. It's like, I'm just waiting till I get out again, kind of thing. But others, you would see that actually talking to the victim, you'd realise what you've done, because I guess you always try to compartmentalize for people to be like, for whatever reason, this is why I did it. They're fine. It just try to shake the blame, but having that of where you have to, and it's beneficial for you, can really help.
That's really cool. Yeah.
I could definitely, like I said, if you again, I think that's interesting. What you have to want to change, right? The same with any sort of addicts in rehab and things. You've got to want to change. That's the key, right? So, but like I said, I definitely, obviously, if you can get that reformation, then that would be an ideal situation. But like I said, it's clearly a very, very flawed system in terms of. I say it's I don't know.
It's funny to say about reformation. I asked my mum, because she's a devout Christian, saying so what do you think for somebody who's been in prison, done whatever, and they truly reformed, found Christ, they kind of reverted, they're like, oh, I've changed my ways, everything like this. Would you say you should get them out of prison, even if they did some abhorrent crime? And for her, she's more of a case of, for bad crimes, or when she's chatted to victims, she's experienced a lot of stuff like that, she's like, no, and even in a religious sense, of a case of, your actions have consequences, and if you have true reform, brilliant, that's great, and you can be formed within prison, and it's but at the end of the day, your actions have consequences, and even if you've changed, which could be the possibility of releasing someone, there's still consequences, and you can never fully trust that someone has reformed. The thing actually, and this is more of a case of more of a government point, being how do you know for a fact someone has reformed? They could just, it's like mental health places. The biggest thing they teach you how to do is to act normal. It's not that you're able to now to blend into society. It doesn't mean you are, inverted commas, normal. It just means now know how to function.
Man, that's the thing about having your parents who are overbearing, right, and really, really strict. You just teach your kids to lie better.
Yeah, fully. Yeah. So it's funny things for how can you trust to release somebody out who is a murderer, even if they say they do everything, you truly believe them, but how do you know they're not just really good at lying?
Oh man, that's so true.
But for me, I think if you want a life sentence, why not just have death?
See, now the thing I would argue for, there is a reason to not have that, is obviously that death is far more permanent, right? So if you get, obviously it would be really bad to do this anyway, but
death is pretty permanent.
If you have the death penalty and then you kill someone, then you realise that actually, some new evidence comes to light, or something happens that, they actually weren't guilty of that crime, then it's pretty terrible, right? Obviously, if that happens with someone serving a life sentence, then you can then take them out of prison. Which I guess that's pretty rare, but also pretty important.
Yeah, I think with some now of there's damning evidence you can get, which is pretty I think obviously
confession level
changed a lot, where it's a case of realistic. But it can happen, but forensics has got a lot better to a point of where realistically, a lot of crimes. It's not like TV shows where it's oh man, they've been framed for this really elaborate crime and this is how they did it. It's more of a case of no, if it squawks like a chicken and walks like a chicken.
Although I did find something about fingerprints really aren't a thing. I don't know if this is true, but they're saying finding a fingerprint on something and it's actually a good enough fingerprint, and you can prove that it was definitely theirs, and the difficulty.
You've got their fingerprint on record as well. You can get a fingerprint for someone, doesn't mean they've ever had it recorded anywhere.
Yeah.
and you're not allowed to go into any other records because it'd be GDPR. So it'd only be if they've been caught by the police previously, they had their fingerprint scanned in, and then you're able to go from there.
Also, I mean, let's not get into it, but there is something about the jury now. Like, juries believe stuff they've seen on TV is more powerful than it really is. So when it's mentioned as evidence by like maybe a defendant lawyer, the lawyers just, they know what's kind of going on inside the jury's heads. So they use something that's not really that good evidence, but they build it up as more so because they know the jury's going to believe it more. But I don't know, that's something.
Crazy, yeah.
Did you guys think of how we could improve prisons? Did you try look at anything about alternatives and like possible ways to improve prisons? Did anyone look up anything like that? Of what's wrong with them? So there's a 70% reoffender rate.
Yeah, I don't know if prison would ever be able to solve that. Like I don't, that kind of gets to the question of ethics again. It's like, some people just inherently more inclined to crime and more inclined to that lifestyle. Like, and with the idea that you could change people and turn them all into perfect citizens, I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, especially because like something that popped up on mine a few times was that the ability to punish legitimizes your like group. So really, like, yeah, like you just said, like, we can fix them to what standard? Like the standard of other better criminals, like the rich politicians who are also criminals, but they're just the ones that punish others.
Yeah,
Probably
right. Some things ask for like a decent start to try help make prisons better is decent funding, decent wardens, and decent staffing. Because one thing I didn't realise, brother saying like one of these like really revolutionary ones in Wrexham, which had loads of stuff like music studios, everything like that. The biggest issue they had was funding. That they had all these things you can do music sessions, but there'd be one session out of possible 5 at a time because there's just not the staff to do it. And so most prisoners ended up in their cell for the majority of the day because there's not enough staff to even look after them all. And one thing of, you'll get some wardens, they'll be 18, and some prisoners, they've been in prison for 20 years. And it's like, so how can you respect somebody who's got a job in a prison when you've been in prisons longer than they've been alive? That's like, which is just mad thought. And mismanagement as well for funding, because brother's saying there's this one place and they had it where they got like these big like eggs or something, because they had like, I think it was 100,000 to spend or something like that. And so rather than getting on like more staff or an extra wing or anything like that, they bought these big eggs, and they're like, you can sit in them, they had different levels, and they had really nice like chill lighting and like seats and music that came out. It was very relaxing. The idea was meant to be like a meditative thing which calms everyone down and makes you feel nice and like you're in a spa. And so £50,000 each, and what prisoners realised, it was a great place to get high in. And they had no cameras in there either. And so after about 2 months, they got wrecked. They both broke, and now this prison has £100,000 worth of this cool looking item, which is effectively ineffective, just sat there. And it's like, you know, people get good ideas.
Man, people are terrible at allocating where funds should go. I mean, that's just a go for schools, hospitals as well, all of that.
Yeah. And again, it's always, how do you get money from people who want it as a punishment to be like, we need more money to make it better for later. Yeah, but I want them punished. I don't care. You can sleep
Alistair.
in an empty cell.
No, I don't know. In a perfect world, obviously, we make them all lovely and it would be nice. But then in a perfect world, you probably wouldn't need prisons. So
that's true. We're going to have to end it soon, but since we're going to go way over time, as per usual, because it's just so much fun. There's so much to talk about.
And do we have a time? Oh, yeah, we do, obviously, but back on.
Vaguely. Do you guys both just feel generally that you've got a bit more of an idea about prisons and prison systems?
Yeah, actually, this is a good. I've heard as well. Obviously, I think it's good to do this sort of. It's a nice balance between being specific, but also being quite like we don't really know much about it to get into. So yeah, good topic, Fred. Good choice.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to next week's, so we'll find out about that very soon.
We will.
So thanks guys for listening wherever and whenever you are. Maybe you're in the car doing whatever you're doing, and I hope that you've got a little bit more of an idea after listening to our episode. That's bye from me and the rest of us.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and has actually made it to the end, please consider following us on Instagram at No Idea Yet Podcast. And if you have any ideas of topics that we could talk about, feel free to either message us there or send us an email at noideayetpodcast@gmail.com.